I have lived in deserts most of my life. I'd say, speaking conservatively, I have spent some 13 years of my life living in one desert or another. There are aspects to such a place that irk me, the heat mostly, but I can't deny that deserts are fascinating ecosystems, full of some of nature's most versatile and adaptive species. The desert itself, I believe, is quite versatile. A spectrum of temperatures, colors, and landscapes, each responsive to their wider geological contexts. There is a lot of variety to be found in deserts, a variety that perhaps is what fascinates me so. Even still, there is a common image that manifests itself within the minds of those who picture deserts. It might be an expansive stretch of yellow sand which reaches past the horizon, glacial wastes whose piercing winds freeze the very air that carries them, or stony hillsides littered with withering vegetation. None of these images are, of course, wrong, but they all carry with them a unique air of beauty. Such a variety, in large part, stems from what classifies these landscapes, their arid climate spurred from an extreme lack of precipitation, qualifications that appear across an entire spectrum of differing environments. But Ryng is not a planet, not like the Earth we are each so familiar with. Ryng isn't natural. It was built. A collection of 3 distinct bands, each meticulously composed, constructed by the world's gods. This artificial nature, this disconnect between the familiarity of reality and the strangeness of this world, is one I want to not only reflect, but emphasize in Ryng's environments. Standing on any one of Ryng's faces should feel foreign, strange, fantastical. It shouldn't feel right. It's not what reality has accustomed us to. But wrong, foreign, strange isn't inherently bad. It too can be beautiful like the desert. I want to capture that beauty, that varied shape, molded by geology and nature. I want to capture my fascination with the desert, a web of beautiful, hostile landscapes, intertwined with an equally adaptive and beautiful range of biodiversity. Deserts on Ryng are classified and formed a little differently than the deserts of reality. Yes, they exhibit some similar symptoms, little precipitation, an arid climate, sparse vegetation, but formed by something completely different. Ryng, being a trio of cosmic bands that slide past one another, exhibits some rather extreme weather patterns when its faces converge, typically at the points where these circles move the fastest. Ryng's largest deserts, Medri's pearled dunes and Yetri's entire face, are where these extreme weather events manifest most frequently. These events, known as arcane storms, are not meteorological in their nature, but rather are spurred about by a form of static magical energy, released when Ryng's faces move past one another with sufficient proximity and speed. These powerful storms, and their volatile, unpredictable effects, are what come to shape Ryng's deserts, their residual magic fueling both impossible geological formations and a high density of magical flora and fauna alike. When it comes to visualizing these impossible landscapes, the pearled dunes are known and named for their white sands, long dead coral, grounded and eroded by the intense winds that lick its sandy peaks. These dunes are littered in the remnants of fossilized coral structures, boulders that have yet to succumb to the erosive forces of nature. Their intricate shape, able to hold trace amounts of water for months at a time, prompting colorful plant growth upon them, red and pink mosses which feed off the sun and residual water hidden within these stones. With the high density of calcium found in coral, pockets of vegetation litter the expansive reaches of the pearled dunes, consisting mostly of a flowering ground-cover plant, the coralblom, whose purple blossoms bloom with the rise of the morning sun, absorbing the morning dew up until the higher hours of the day. Larger vegetative specimens, such as trees and large cacti, are unable to withstand the desert's intense winds, leaving these ground-cover plants to largely dominate the ecosystem's plant life, with the exception of the whistletrill. These plants, rather than photosynthesis, draw their energy from arcane residue. Since discovered to be present on each of Ryng's 3 circles, these charcoal black canes sprout within magical ecosystems and remnants of powerful magics. Depending on the residual magic of the environment, the cane's leaves will take any number of differing colors: chalk white for kinetic, sharp crimson for blood, deep navy for incandescence, voidly violet for abstract, and a brilliant gold for alchemical. The plant gains its name from its hollow shape, which whistles a deep, droning tone when the wind blows in just the right direction. Due to the plant's arcane nature, it has found many uses, their leaves being farmed for diluted essence, the identification of residual magic within an environment, and medicine, where they are surgically grafted onto victims of magical attacks in order to siphon any damaging residual energies from the subject. But aside from these vegetative wonders, perhaps the most wondrous sight to be found within these dunes are the Hanging Prominence, a chain of massive boulders and mountains which stretches across the desert, imbued with the kinetic forces of an ancient storm, which leaves them suspended hundreds of feet in the air. Such sights extend beyond this chain of mountains, as this residual force has embedded itself all across these sands, allowing travelers to encounter these hovering stones within any corner of the pearled dunes. But the beauty of deserts lies in their variety. The sands of Ryng's outermost circle, Yetri, whose entire face has been overtaken by this one continental desert. These sands, divided in name by humanity's designation, stretch across Yetri's complete face, save only a few pockets of undisturbed land. The grand majority of this expansive ecosystem is dominated by the iron sands, flat wastes of loose grain, colored by the high concentration of iron they are composed of. An endless stretch of dunes and cracked earth, the iron sands are incredibly hostile to all forms of life, with only the most resilient and adaptive organisms being capable of calling such scorched wastes their home. Breaking up these endless expanses are the Crimson Towers, collections of mountainous spires which reach into the heavens, spears of red and black rock intricately layered over millennia of geological formation. These spires, founded on soil and stone, are the only places vegetation can be found in abundance, the mineral-rich earth being a natural sediment for blankets of leafy plants. This, coupled with the spire's natural defense against the desert winds, allows even trees to grow within the hearts of these mountainous chains, oases against the unrelenting hostility of Yetri's open sands. In addition to the Crimson Towers, boneyards litter the expanses of Yetri's deserts, pockets of nutrient-rich soil fertilized by the bones of primordial gods, theorized by religious scholars to be the remnants of forgotten dictates, the godly beasts of sin. Yet instead of vegetation, fungal growths dominate these pillars of bone, collections of interconnected organisms feeding only off the corpses of gods and the residuals of magic. Boneyards, however, are not exclusive to the deserts of Yetri, being found on all edges of Ryng's reach, though not nearly to the commonality seen within Yetri's barren sands. Similarly to the primordial nature of the boneyards, the glass spires, too, were formed by godly deity, though, rather than one's death, through one's power. Found in the heart of the Crimson Legions, the empire of Khan, the Wrathful Spear, the glass spires are a symbol as to the god's strength, an expanse of sands, melted and shaped into crystalline spears which rival only mountains in their presence. This glass takes a deep green hue, a symptom of the sand's high concentration of iron, a mockery of the world's greenery, an affront to the beauty of life, where no living thing apart from God may reside. Yet there exists other pockets where no life can survive, coined by desert traveler and merchants as the Black Flats, expanses of perfectly level stone, named for its charcoal black coloration. These singeing wastes hold no life to speak, completely devoid of the resources crucial to survival, leaving the flats only as omens of death and hardship, yet beautiful in their dreadful serenity. Yet life finds a way, the means to survive these cruel and harsh environments, leading us right into. With such varied reaches of Ryng's desert environments, it is only expected that the fauna of such ecosystems is varied to match, with stark differences seen between the expanses of the white and red sands. Of course, these deserts are home to plenty of creatures we are familiar with, all sorts of insects, reptiles, and birds populating these landscapes. However, there is a great deal of foreign creatures as well, critters and beasts shaped by their arcane environment. In exploring a few of these animals, I'll be sharing a collection of 7 distinct species found within these desert ecosystems, some native to one, the other, or both distinct deserts we've discussed so far. Of course, this is not a complete collection, as such a thing would take far longer than any one of us has time for. But these 7 species should provide a suitable glimpse as to the grand biodiversity present within Ryng's deserts. Exclusive to the white sands of the Pearl Dunes, the Moscood are blind, small mammals with short, brown fur that coats the entirety of their round, pudgy bodies. Their short, clawed limbs are used to dig through sediments and loose sand, burying themselves just beneath the ground. This allows the Moscood to remain hidden from larger predators and protected from the intense elements of the desert. When threatened, the Moscood rely on an intensely focused form of abstract magic, which, after sensing sufficient vibrations on the surface, transmits an intense frequency of noise into the mind of its perceived threat, stunning it. This frequency is transmitted directly into its target's mind through the use of abstract magic. Although intense, larger creatures, including humans, can overcome the noise's stunning properties, however, can still experience intense fatigue and nausea after being exposed to it. With their slow metabolism, the Moscood can go days without food, remaining buried for as long as possible, only emerging when needing to relocate after a sufficient period of time without access to the plant roots that comprise their diet. Socially, the Moscood are solitary animals, mating whenever convenient to produce a litter of up to 5 pups. These pups remain submerged beneath the desert sand until they reach total maturity after a period of 6 weeks, where they can then continue their lives as independent adults. These creatures, thanks to their evolved qualities in the use of abstract magic, are farmed and hunted for their brains, which, when ground and dried, produce a fine powder that can be used in the production of abstract essence, a material critical to the casting of such magics. However, the amount of material extracted from such a creature, thanks to its small size, is rather minuscule, leading most to outsource the collection of such essences to the hunting of more lucrative creatures, even if the risk remains much higher. The corvinet, found within both the white and red sands of Ryng, is a large, scavenging bird of prey, with a wingspan that can reach just beyond 7 feet in length, outstretched in a display of black, iridescent feathers which glimmer shades of green when struck by the right angle of light. Their heads, whose feathers shift to a bright red in coloration, are most distinguished by their long serrated beaks and pronounced crests, which extends from their brow back to the crown of their head. These crests, bone white in color, are used to disperse body heat and regulate temperature, jointly used by males to attract a mate, with larger crests being more attractive to females. Their talons are short and blunt, used primarily for standing rather than capturing prey, as the main source of food for the corvinet are corpses, though if left long enough without food, corvinet have been documented to hunt for sick and weak prey. In tandem with this selection and diet, the evolved beaks of the corvinet developed their serrated edge to carve and saw at flesh and bone, allowing these birds to access not only the flesh of a corpse, but the nutrient-dense marrow found within their bones. This preference in meal has allowed the corvinet to develop an incredible resistance to disease, as well as an acute senses to detect infection, which is what aids corvinets in tracking their preferred prey on top of their incredible eyesight. It is in these tracking abilities that humanity has found great use of these birds, desert pirates often training and using them as scouts to search for lone desert travelers and communities, targets for capture and sale. Outside of this, corvinet are used in similar fields of differing contexts, used by hunters to locate a particular quarry, militaries in the uncovering of an enemy position, and in some cases, nobility, who use their heightened senses to detect poison within food and drink. In the wild, these birds hunt in flocks from 6 to 12 in size, led by a matriarchal figure, typically the oldest of the flock. Led and directed by this larger female, these flocks comb their territories in search of food, before collectively descending onto a corpse and using their intimidating size and numbers to repel any other carnivores that would look to take their spoils. Interestingly, it has been observed that differing corvidae flocks do not compete with one another once one has descended onto a corpse, possibly respecting some natural law of finders keepers. These habits, within both their wild and domesticated life, demonstrate a great deal of intelligence within such creatures, which is largely what has allowed them to be used domestically across all corners and classes of Ryng's humanoid society. Exclusive to the red sands of Yetri, the Skordali are carnivorous, foot-long insectoid creatures with mantis-esque heads. Being classified as large insects, they have 6 legs, 4 longer ones used for locomotion, and a pair of smaller legs within the middle of their body, often folded up against the thorax when not in use. The Skordali use these smaller, articulate legs to manipulate objects within their surroundings, serving almost as a pair of primitive hands. Their bodies are sleek and angularly armored with a tough, chitinous shell, a defense further reinforced by this creature's magical abilities. The Skordali are a rare example of alchemical magic in the wild, and thus are widely hunted for their auxiliary stomachs, the arcane organ that can be produced into alchemical essence. This stomach, when not cut from its body, is used by the creature to store excess ingested biomass, such as proteins and plant matter. These ingested resources, rather than being broken down and digested, are instead alchemically altered into a viscous black bile. This bile, when regurgitated and exposed to the open air, hardens to an incredible degree, with a strength and brittleness akin to solid stone. This strength, coupled with the bile's relative viscosity shortly after regurgitation, allows the Skordali to shape and mold this bile into elaborate shapes and structures, often coating the backs of their exoskeletons in an additional layer of bile, which, though strong, is incredibly lightweight, allowing the Skordali to gain additional defenses without compromising their speed. The Skordali's danger to hunters, however, does not stem from their carnivorous nature and durability alone. As much like other social insects, the Skordali each serve a larger hive, a collective that can grow to be hundreds of Skordali large. In this unified state, the Skordali both hunt and defend their hive using the same strategy, immobilizing their target with projectile bile before swarming the target and eating them alive. Their defenses, however, extend far beyond a simple mob mentality, as the Skordali construct elaborate towers and tunnels from their bile, structural networks that can grow to be hundreds of meters in circumference. In service to the hive, Skordali follow the traditional designations of smaller social insects, divided into workers, drones, and queens, with the grand majority of Skordali, with the exception of drones, being female. Workers make up the grand majority of the Skordali population, constructing and maintaining the hive structure and serving as its main defensive force in the face of predators and hunters alike. Drones, the male Skordali, serve not only as a queen's mate, but as her personal guard. Larger in size than the workers, some 3 feet in length, their large, flat heads allow them to block the tunnels that lead directly into the queen's chamber, serving as a final line of defense in case of the hive's breaching. Lastly, the queen, a female who grows to a massive 5 feet in length, serves only to breed and direct the hive, using their instinctual intellect to direct her workers in the expansion and defense of the hive. Once grown to maturity, a queen becomes immobile, weighed down by their swollen abdomens which prevent the use of their legs, which shift in their purpose to serve as a collection of primitive arms and hands used to manipulate objects within her environment. In the case where a second queen is born within a hive, the young queen will either eat the residing queen, or in the case where the sitting queen is fit and healthy, will leave the hive with a few drones to accompany her, soon thereafter establishing her own proper hive. This complex social structure, similarly to ants, calls for a high level of intelligence and cooperation, further evidenced by the incredible defensive tactics recorded in journalistic entries of Skordali hunters, who are often forced to use fire in order to disperse the unified front of such dangerous creatures. Similarly to the Skordali, the Yarnhouth are native only to Yetri's iron sands, relying on the high density of iron in order to survive. The Yarnhouth are lean and muscular creatures, reaching roughly 12 feet when standing on their hind legs. Normally, a Yarnhouth's posture has it traverse in a quadrupedal stance, walking on the knuckles of its forelimbs. However, in moments of stress, or in the need of an intimidating display, Yarnhouth are known to spend brief periods of time on their hind legs. Their skin is rough and thick, a dirty metallic hue, reminiscent of an impure iron. This complexion stems from the Yarnhouth's vegetative and mineral diet, wherein, in addition to whatever vegetation it can find, the Yarnhouth consumes the iron in the desert sands, grinding it down with its large, flat teeth. A creature evolved in the use of incandescence magic, the Yarnhouth's throat heats this sand far beyond its melting point, separating grain from iron before integrating this molten iron into their bloodstream. From there, this molten iron makes its way into the Yarnhouth's skin, providing a protective layer of natural iron armor to defend itself against its natural predator, the Eldio. In addition to this defensive shell, the superheated throat organ of the Yarnhouth is capable of storing trace amounts of this molten metal, which can later be spat in a deterring projectile attack, one which can cause severe burns and injury to those it strikes. These abilities have since coined the creature as Forge Shapers, a name further realized through the Yarnhouth's flat, anvil-esque heads, which males use in displays of dominance over other males, particularly during the courtship of a mate. These demonstrations occur often, as the Yarnhouth are a social creature, traveling the deserts in packs of anywhere from 20 to 30 strong, a defensive measure to intimidate any predators and prevent any unforeseen ambushes. In situations where the pack is in danger, the males are called to the defense of the young, using their flat, frilled heads as great bludgeoning clubs, able to exert enough force to shatter bone in a single swing. This, coupled with their relatively low intelligence, makes the Yarnhouth incredibly skittish, often reacting in defensive violence within any stressful situation, making domestication efforts rather difficult. However, such efforts are not impossible, as old Stortinian communities, the humanoid desert folk, have long since domesticated strains of these creatures, using them both as mounts and a means of producing iron, grinding down excess buildups of iron on their skin to be reforged into tools and weapons. Such a feat, however, is one seen exclusively within these old traditional communities, as it is a process that has been passed down and refined over untold generations, a secret held close by these communities' elders, the domestication of such a beast being a ritualistic rite of passage for any child entering adulthood, with religious significance. Outside of these communities, however, the Yarnhouth are hunted for the production of incandescence essence, the essential ingredient to the arcane manipulation of temperature. As such, Yarnhouth populations have seen a drastic decline, but one that in the face of Yetri's lawlessness has little hope of slowing down anytime soon. Even still, the adaptive populations of this creature have recently been recorded within Metri's Pearled Dunes, supplementing their iron-heavy diets for the density of calcium present within Medri's coral sands. Such a change reflects itself in this regional species' armor, which takes a composition of hardened calcium, a genetic modification evolved to take better advantage of the mineral's abundance. Perhaps the most graceful creatures within Ryng's red deserts, the Djurval, commonly known as sand whales, are large creatures named for the similar silhouette they share with the aquatic whale. Contrasting their aquatic counterparts, the Djurval have 6 fins and a wide tail to help them swim through the sands of Ryng, a feat only possible with their deep vocal calls, which emit a powerful frequency able to cause the sands around them to fluidize and be swam through. Furthermore, in addition to its fluidizing properties, this frequency allows the Djurval to navigate their surroundings with a form of echolocation while submerged beneath the surface, preventing the need to breach the sands for anything other than oxygen, a surfacing only necessary once every few hours. Their incredibly slow but efficient metabolism allows the Djurval to survive for months without a meal, allowing them to trek great distances without interruption. Though, when needed, the Djurval primarily hunt Skordali, picking off great swarms of them at a hive's edge by fluidizing the sand beneath their feet and snatching them whole. An incredibly nutritious meal with high densities of calcium, carbon, and protein. A single passing of a Skordali hive proves to be more than sufficient for a meal, even for something so large. Socially, Djurval are physically solitary, Though, with their great powerful calls able to travel over a kilometer within the desert sands, the Jurval always remain within the call of another. The exception to this rule lies in the rearing of young, as a calf will stay by its mother's side until reaching maturity, where it then will venture out on its own. However, there are times when these young are forcefully taken from their mothers, desert pirates capturing these creatures for their incredible value within their trade. When fully grown, serving as great engines for their sand striders, land-faring ships built to glide across the loose sands of Yethri's wide, iron sands. These ships, constructed on similar engineering principles to pontoons, each serve a unique purpose, most commonly built or commissioned by the crew that will come to operate it, only further modified and adjusted to suit their pirating needs. Of course, the idea of piracy out on the iron sands is loosely defined at best, encompassing all manner of dune-faring traveler from slavers and smugglers to ferrymen, merchants, and traveling circuses, each of which with their own goals, morals, and people upon their ships. Regardless, the function of these sand striders is dependent on the Jurval as an engine, with recorded cases of having up to 3 of them connected to a single ship, in cases where a strider's size and weight warrant such energy. As engines to these ships, Jurval who fall into the hands of such pirates are pierced in iron and clamped in great chains which run into the bows of their captors' ships, a fate leaving them permanently indentured to their captors, who steer these great beasts with a strike of the chain, its vibrations causing the Jurval to veer towards that preferred direction. Though grisly in their capture and binding, these creatures are an incredible investment to these pirating sandfarers, who, following the whale's initial capture, will take great care of their prized beasts, ensuring both their health and happiness in the efforts to keep them as capable of their job as possible. Such domestication efforts have proven so effective, in fact, that in cases where previously captured Jurvals find freedom, they often prove unfit to survive in the wild for more than a few months, lacking the developmental knowledge to effectively hunt and protect itself without the support of their captors. Native to both Ryng's red and white sands, the Eldil are large, 6-legged creatures who can grow up to 10 meters in length, with males growing to half the length. Aside from this imposing size, the 2 rows of the Eldil's teeth are highly conductive, allowing them to use a combination of static buildup and alchemical magic to fling arcs of lightning from their mouths. They do this to not only hunt, as well as defend themselves, but as a display to attract mates, molding their crackling arcs into elaborate shapes to display dominance over other males and females alike. Such an ability, however, has a much greater reach of utility than simply this, as Eldils use these arcs of lightning to superheat the sands they burrow into. This instinctual habit solidifies the walls of an Eldil's burrow with a thin, glass shell, a protective measure to reinforce their tunnels, as well as defend their burrows from larger predators. These burrows, constructed by an Eldil female, are used as a means to attract a mate, just as the males use their displays of lightning to show their suitability. The pressure to perform, however, lies largely with the male, as since females are much larger than the males, the failure to woo a mate will often result in the death of a male. These rituals, which begin with a young male's departure from their parental den, will have this male traverse great distances in search of the den of a solitary female, whereafter a male will perform their lightning display, and if selected, will then be allowed to mate. After mating, the male will be given charge of the mother's eggs until they hatch, while the female is given charge with the protection of the den. After their children hatch, the father will be eaten by their litter of young, which can hatch upwards of 6 Eldil pups. Being another of the few examples of alchemical magic in the wild, the Eldil are consistently hunted by poachers for their teeth, which can be ground and treated into a potent alchemical essence. However, attempting to slay an Eldil in its burrow is a death sentence, causing hunters and poachers alike to specifically target traveling males during their trek from their parental den to their possible mates. Such a window, however, is short. Neither is it any easier to track a traveling male, who will traverse the grand majority of their trek beneath the sand surface, a measure to prevent a loss of energy beneath the intense desert heat. As such, Eldil hunting is an incredibly lucrative endeavor, both for the difficulty and danger of such a profession, as well as the product able to be taken from such a creature. The final creature we'll be discussing today, one whose myth of existence is only rumored to surface in the most isolated corners of the Iron Sands, the Greymaw are the largest sand creatures to dwell on Ryng's faces, great monsters of leathery skin and thousands of teeth, seen within Ryng's desert communities, less as animals and more as deities, akin to the impossible leviathans of Ryng's open seas. The Greymaw, in its incredible size, is divided into its two main stages of life: a mobile, larval stage, where the creature roams its territories in an active hunt for prey, and its mature stage, where the creature becomes largely immobile, sustaining itself through the misfortune of anything that falls into its maw. While young, these creatures can range anywhere in size from a few meters to a kilometer in length, often reaching maturity after breaking this kilometer length, a size which is theorized to take several centuries to reach. While in this larval stage, the Greymaw is serpentine in its shape, allowing it to glide just beneath the desert surface to travel. The head of the Greymaw has no traditional sensory organs to speak of, instead navigating with a specialized organ incredibly sensitive to vibrations in the sand, particularly those caused by sounds. This lends incredibly well to the Greymaw's preferred prey, the Jurval, whose vocal calls can be detected by a hunting Greymaw several kilometers away. Aside from this organ, located just beneath the crown of the Greymaw's skull, the Greymaw's head contains only a petaled mouth, which flares out into 3 distinct flaps, a structure that allows the Greymaw to grapple even with prey too large to be consumed whole. Once reaching maturity, however, the Greymaw's active hunting style fades from their instinct, new habits overtaking their subconscious. The Greymaw burrows deep below the desert, flaring open its mouth at the sand's surface before concealing itself just beneath. Here, it will wait for weeks, even months, until something large enough crosses the threshold of its jaws, before they snap closed and devour whatever lies within them. This hunting strategy is only possible by the creature's incredibly efficient metabolism, which, like most creatures of the desert, is fine-tuned to be the most energy conservative as possible. This, coupled with the Greymaw's motionless hunting tactics, are what allows for a creature of this size to survive as long as it does without food, sometimes even being fed by local populations for fear of its divine wrath. Creatures of this size often being taken for gods themselves, especially within the harsh environments of the desert. Yet, such creatures are largely considered impossible by the wider populations of Ryng. No beast on land can grow to such a size, they say, writing off such tales of encounter as little more than fables and sailors' stories, written and shared in an effort to bolster a pirate's reputation. Such skepticism is only further bolstered by the fact that no true confirmation has been documented surrounding these creatures, even amidst consistent Brass Lotus expeditions. Such a lack of findings is often attributed to a Greymaw's surface breaching, often being accompanied with an incredible, dense sandstorm, obscuring documenting expeditions which are often made by airship, a fact considered awfully convenient by those more skeptical populations. These are just some of the many creatures and landscapes of Ryng's deserts, a testament to this world's continued growth and expansion as I continue to explore my creative limits. If you enjoyed this world-building exploration, consider liking the video and subscribing for further details on this and my many other upcoming world-building projects. If you'd like to further immerse yourself into this world I am creating, consider visiting my Patreon, where you can purchase the first edition of my TTRPG, Glass Arsenal. Until next time, this has been Trackpad Artist. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for our next discussion.